Hey thinkers, and welcome back to Thought Pairing.
Hi, everybody.
Today, I'm joined by my friend Suchi
It's so good to be here.
to unpack a book that's been making waves in my world. I don't know about yours.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
We're tackling Choose to Be Happy
Yes.
by Dr. Tom G. Stevens, who kind of brings a really fascinating blend of perspective to this.
I know.
He's a psychologist
Right.
and a former minister.
Yeah, really interesting.
And the book's premise, get this,
Okay.
is that we actually have a lot more control over our happiness than we think.
More than we might realize, for sure.
It's so easy to fall into that trap
No.
of thinking, oh, I'll be happy when I finally get that promotion, or when I meet the right person.
Right. Or when I buy that house, or when I go on that vacation.
Yeah, exactly right.
But Dr. Stevens challenges that pretty directly.
So what if we could be happy even when, things aren't perfect?
Yeah, that's exactly what he dives into.
And he backs it up with research, right?
Yeah.
And real life examples.
Yeah,
It's not.
This isn't just some fluffy self-help.
Right. It's not just some feel-good mantra.
Exactly. It's a practical guide
Yeah.
to understanding the psychology of happiness.
One of the things that really struck me early on in the book was that story about Dr. Stevens and his brother
Oh, yeah.
getting angry at their dad.
Yes.
Ah.
It perfectly illustrates how
Like, it's that classic.
we blame external events for our feelings instead of recognizing the role that our own thoughts play.
We give our power away.
Yes.
We say things like, he made me angry.
Yeah.
But the book argues that it's not the event itself
It's our interpretation of it.
that triggers the emotion.
Right.
So it's like we're giving away our power,
Yes, exactly.
letting those external circumstances just dictate how we feel.
And the book really empowers us to reclaim that power
Okay, so reclaim the power.
by understanding that we have a choice
Oh, I like that.
in how we respond.
So it's not about denying our feelings.
No, not at all.
But it's about becoming aware of the thoughts behind them.
Right.
Becoming aware of what's driving those feelings.
And then choosing.
And then consciously choosing how we want to respond.
Okay, so that leads us to this idea of internal routes to happiness.
Yes.
And the book contrasts this with
External.
routes to happiness, like
Yeah.
achieving success or social status,
The things we think are going
Right.
to bring us happiness.
which Dr. Stevens argues are often unreliable sources of lasting happiness.
Right.
We chase those external goals thinking they'll finally bring us contentment.
Oh, yeah.
We get there and we're still kind of wanting more.
Still wanting more, yeah. And then we're on to the next thing.
It's like that hedonic treadmill,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Constant seeking that next thing.
So how do we tap into those internal routes then?
That's the question.
What does the book suggest?
Well, Dr. Stevens points to this concept he calls harmonious functioning.
Okay, I like that. Harmonious functioning.
It's a key internal route,
Okay.
and he describes it as a state where our thoughts, feelings, and actions are all aligned. Ooh, I like that.
Creating a sense of inner peace and fulfillment.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about everything being in alignment.
Everything working together.
Doesn't that sound a lot like the flow state concept?
Exactly.
That feeling of being completely absorbed in an activity and time kind of melts away.
Yes. And the book suggests that we can actually learn to cultivate these states
So we can be more intentional about
more
it.
intentionally. Yeah.
Okay, so this is starting to sound like we have a lot more agency
Yeah.
over our happiness than we realize.
Than we tend to think.
Another big takeaway for me was the book's emphasis on self-worth.
Oh, yes.
Dr. Stevens argues that our self-image is actually even more powerful
Wow.
than our actual image
I love that point.
because it highlights how much our beliefs about ourselves
Our beliefs about ourselves.
really shape our reality.
They shape our reality, yes.
If we see ourselves as capable
Capable.
and worthy,
Right.
we're more likely to act in ways that confirm that belief. And on the flip side, if we're constantly putting ourselves down,
Mm-hmm.
we can end up sabotaging our own success.
Sabotaging ourselves, yeah.
Those negative self-beliefs can really spiral.
Into these dysfunctional thoughts and habits.
Yeah, and I've definitely been there.
Haven't we all?
So Dr. Stevens really emphasizes that accepting our bodies and abilities
Accepting ourselves.
is the foundation
and foundation for
of genuine self-worth.
It's about recognizing our inherent value.
Okay, so it's not about what we achieve or, what kind of validation we get from others.
It's about who we are
It's about embracing who we are
right now.
right now, not who we think we should be.
It's tough, though.
That could be a lot easier said than done right,
It can be.
to move from external validation to that internal self-acceptance.
It's a journey for sure.
The book digs into this by exploring the difference
Yeah.
between externally centered and internally centered values
Okay.
and how they influence our happiness.
How they influence our happiness, yeah.
So externally centered values would be things like wealth,
Well,
status, or approval from others.
external validation.
Right.
Yeah.
While internally centered values might be more about personal growth, authenticity, or connection with others.
Yes. More about who we are as people.
And the book suggests that when we base our self-worth on these external factors,
Right.
our happiness becomes conditional
It does.
because it depends on things outside of our control.
Outside our control, yeah. And it can be a recipe for a roller coaster of emotions.
Right, we're constantly chasing.
Chasing something we can't quite grasp.
Makes me think of that analogy from the book about being the star of your own movie
I love that analogy.
versus feeling like a neglected extra.
Yes. Are we taking charge of our story?
Or are we letting external forces dictate our roles
It really challenges us to think about our values.
and where they lie and how they're shaping our choices?
Exactly. And that's where this whole idea of harmonious functioning comes back in.
Okay, back to harmonious functioning.
Because when we're living in alignment with our true values and pursuing goals that are meaningful to us,
Yeah.
we're more likely to experience those states of flow and fulfillment.
Right, it's about creating a life that feels authentic and purposeful,
Authentic and purposeful, yes.
rather than one driven by external expectations or societal pressures.
Exactly. So we've talked about harmonious functioning a couple of times now.
Yeah, and it seems like it's kind of the crux of the book's approach to happiness.
I think so.
So what are some of the specifics
Well, he does give us some specifics.
about how we can actually cultivate this state? Dr. Stevens doesn't just leave us hanging, does he?
Not at all. He provides some very specific strategies, and he gives us this acronym
I do love a good acronym.
to remember them by.
All right, hit me with it.
CHEGA.
Chugga-fo. Okay, I'm intrigued.
It stands for choice, harmony, understanding, goals, optimism, and focus.
All right, so each of those represents a key element in the journey towards greater happiness.
Toward greater happiness and fulfillment. Yeah.
All right, so let's unpack these one by one.
Okay, let's do it.
What's the choice thing all about?
Choice is about recognizing that we always have a choice
In any given situation.
in how we respond to any given situation.
Okay.
We can choose to engage with it or walk away.
Okay.
We can choose to focus on the positive or the negative.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Yeah, there's a lot of choice involved in choosing to be happy.
Exactly. It's not about ignoring the difficult stuff,
It's not about pretending it's not there,
but it's about choosing how we want to relate to it.
choosing how we relate to it.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about harmony?
Okay.
I feel like we've touched on this already.
Yes, in relation to harmonious functioning as a concept.
Right.
This is a little more specific.
Okay, so this strategy specifically focuses on resolving those inner conflicts that might be draining our energy.
Draining our energy and our happiness.
Got it. So give us an example of how this might play out in real life.
Okay, so let's say you're feeling resentful about having to work late. The harmony strategy would involve exploring those feelings
Okay.
and figuring out what values are clashing.
Like maybe you value spending time with your family,
Yeah.
but you also value doing a good job at work.
Right. And by acknowledging that conflict, you can find a way to move forward that feels more aligned.
With your true priorities.
These are true priorities, yeah.
So it's about finding a way to harmonize those different parts of yourself.
Yeah, rather than pretending the conflict doesn't exist.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, on to understanding.
Right.
What does that entail?
It's about understanding the situation that's causing you distress.
So like taking a step back from the emotional whirlwind
Yes. Taking a step back.
and trying to see things more objectively.
Or objectively, yeah.
What are the facts? What are your assumptions?
And Dr. Stevens talks about creating a roadmap to success.
Ooh, okay. A roadmap.
Once we understand the situation,
Clearly.
we can start to formulate a plan.
Okay, so understanding is about getting clarity
Clarity.
and then using that clarity to create a plan of action.
A plan of action, exactly.
All right, next up, goals.
Goals.
I feel like this one is pretty self-explanatory, right?
It might seem that way.
But I'm sure there's more to it.
There is. It's more than just setting any old goal.
Okay.
Dr. Stevens talks about the importance of setting goals that are challenging enough to keep you engaged,
Right.
but not so overwhelming that they lead to anxiety.
So it's about finding that sweet spot.
That sweet spot, that flow state,
Yeah.
and he breaks it down even further with another acronym.
Acronyms on top of acronyms. Okay,
Yep.
I'm game.
This one is LAPDS.
LAPDS. All right, what does that stand for?
It stands for lower your expectations if they're causing you stress.
Okay.
Have alternative goals in case your main goal doesn't work out.
Okay.
Focus on the process rather than just the outcome.
Okay.
Set dynamic goals that can evolve as you do and
Uh-huh.
keep them simple and achievable.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack, but it makes so much sense.
It's about setting yourself up for success.
Right. And making sure your goals are actually serving you.
Yeah, and that brings us to optimism.
The power of positive thinking.
But it's more than just slapping on a happy face.
I was going to say, Dr. Stevens has a more nuanced take on it than just,
Than just ignoring reality.
Right.
It's not about denying the reality
Yeah.
of difficult situations. It's about cultivating this belief
that you can ultimately be happy.
that you can ultimately be happy.
No matter what challenges come your way.
No matter what comes your way, yeah.
So it's not about blind faith.
It's about faith in yourself.
It's about having faith in your own resilience.
Yes, in your own resilience and ability to adapt.
And that kind of optimism can be incredibly empowering.
Incredibly empowering.
Right. It helps you face challenges with more courage.
With more courage and determination.
Okay, last but not least.
We have focus.
Focus. Bring it home for us.
All right. Focus is about directing your attention toward what really matters.
Minimizing distractions.
Minimizing distractions, yes.
Staying committed to your goals.
To your goals and values.
It's like having blinders on.
Blinders on.
Blocking out the noise and focusing on what you want to achieve.
Exactly. And Dr. Stevens points out that this is a skill
That can be developed.
that can be developed with practice.
The more you practice it.
The better you get at it.
Okay, so we've got Shagavuff.
We've got Shagago.
Full toolkit.
This toolkit for managing our emotions and choosing happiness.
But I want to take a closer look at this harmonious functioning concept
Okay.
because it seems like it really underpins
It underpins a lot of what he's talking about.
so much of what Dr. Stevens is talking about.
It really does. And it's fascinating because he connects it to some other really interesting psychological theories. He draws on Dr. Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow, which we've touched on, and also Dr. Kelly's theory of personal constructs.
Now, I'm not super familiar with Dr. Kelly's theory. Can you give us a quick rundown?
Well, it's a bit complex, but basically Dr. Kelly believed we each have our own unique system for interpreting the world, kind of like a set of lenses we wear.
So we're not all seeing the world in the same way.
Exactly. Our experiences, values, and beliefs all shape how we perceive things, and Dr. Stevens suggests that harmonious functioning happens when our actions align with those constructs, when we're living in a way that feels congruent with our personal understanding of the world.
So it's about more than just feeling good in the moment. It's about living a life that feels authentic and meaningful to us.
Precisely. And that's where those Chugov strategies can really help us get there.
Speaking of Chugov, I'm curious to hear more about how these strategies actually work in practice. Can you give us some examples from the book?
Absolutely. One example that stood out to me was in the understanding section. Dr. Stevens talks about a woman who was constantly feeling stressed and overwhelmed by her job.
Relatable.
Right. She was about to quit, but then she decided to apply the understanding strategy. She took a step back and really analyzed the situation. What were the specific tasks that were causing her the most stress? What were her assumptions about the job? And what were the potential outcomes if she stayed versus if she left?
So she was basically creating that roadmap you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. And through this process, she realized that a lot of her stress stemmed from a lack of communication with her boss. She had assumed he wouldn't be receptive to her concerns, but she decided to challenge that assumption and have an open conversation with him. And you know what? He was totally understanding, and they were able to work together to create a more manageable workload for her.
Wow. So just by applying that understanding strategy,
Yeah.
she was able to completely transform her experience of the job.
It's amazing, right? And it shows how powerful it can be to simply pause, reflect, and gain a clearer understanding of the situation before reacting. It's like that old adage, respond, don't react.
Makes sense. So what about some of the other strategies? What are some examples of those in action?
Well, in the goals section, Dr. Stevens talks about the importance of setting LAPDS goals. Remember, lower alternative process dynamics simple. He gives an example of a man who wanted to run a marathon, but he was setting himself up for disappointment by focusing solely on the outcome of finishing the race. He was putting so much pressure on himself that it was actually sucking the joy out of running.
So what did he do?
He decided to apply the LAPDS framework. He lowered his expectations. Instead of aiming for a specific time, he focused on simply enjoying the process of training. He also set alternative goals. If he didn't end up running the marathon, he'd still be proud of himself for getting in shape and improving his fitness. And he focused on making the goal dynamic if he got injured or life got in the way, he'd adjust his training plan accordingly. By shifting his focus in this way, he was able to take the pressure off and actually rediscover his love of running.
I love that. It's a great reminder that sometimes we need to adjust our approach to our goals in order to actually achieve them, and even more importantly, to enjoy the journey along the way. What about some examples from the other chug-off strategies?
In the optimism section, Dr. Stevens talks about a woman who is going through a really tough divorce. She was feeling incredibly down and hopeless, but she decided to consciously cultivate optimism by focusing on the things she was grateful for, even small things like a sunny day or a good cup of coffee. And by shifting her attention in this way, she was able to start to see glimmers of hope amidst the darkness. It didn't erase the pain of the divorce, but it gave her the strength to keep moving forward.
That's so powerful. It reminds me of the saying, where attention goes, energy flows. If we're constantly focusing on the negative, it's no wonder we feel drained and unhappy.
Exactly. And the focus strategy builds on that idea. Dr. Stevens emphasizes the importance of minimizing distractions and consciously directing our attention towards the things that truly matter to us.
So it's about being intentional with our time and energy, right? Not letting ourselves get swept away by the constant stream of information and demands that are thrown at us.
Exactly. Dr. Stevens talks about creating focus rituals, little things we can do to help us stay present and engaged, like putting our phones away during meals, setting aside dedicated time for creative pursuits, or simply taking a few minutes each day to practice mindfulness.
Those are all great ideas. I think it's so easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of daily life and lose sight of what's truly important. So these chug-a-fuff strategies sound like really practical tools for staying grounded and focused, but I'm still curious to hear more about the connection between harmonious functioning and Dr. Kelly's theory of personal constructs. How did that actually play out in terms of choosing to be happy?
That's a great question. And it gets to the heart of what makes this book so insightful. Remember how we talked about how those personal constructs are like a set of lenses we wear, they shape how we view the world? Well, Dr. Stevens suggests that when we're living in a way that aligns with those constructs, we experience a sense of coherence and meaning. Our actions feel congruent with our values and beliefs.
So it's not just about doing things that make us feel good. It's about doing things that feel right to us, that resonate with our deepest sense of self.
Exactly. And that's where the real magic of harmonious functioning comes in. When we're living in alignment with those constructs, we're more likely to experience those flow states, to feel a sense of purpose, and to make choices that lead to genuine happiness.
It's like everything clicks into place. Our thoughts, our feelings, our actions are all in sync.
Precisely. And that's not to say it's always easy. Life throws us curveballs, and there will be times when we feel out of alignment, but the chunk of strategies give us a framework for navigating those challenges and finding our way back to that state of harmony.
So it's an ongoing process, not a destination we arrive at and then just stay there forever.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so empowering. It reminds us that we have the agency to shape our own experience of happiness. It's not something that's just handed to us. It's something we actively cultivate.
I'm really appreciating how this book goes beyond the surface level of just think positive and really digs into the psychological underpinnings of happiness. It's giving me a whole new perspective on how to approach my own well-being.
Me too. And what I love is that it's not just theoretical. Dr. Stevens provides so many real-life examples and practical exercises that make these concepts come alive. It's a book I know I'll be referring back to again and again.
Absolutely. I'm feeling really inspired to put these ideas into practice in my own life.
Me too. And I think it's important to remember that happiness is not a selfish pursuit.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite.
When we prioritize our own well-being, we're actually better equipped to show up for others and make a positive impact on the world. It's like that oxygen mask analogy they give you on airplanes. You have to take care of yourself first before you can help anyone else.
Couldn't agree more. And that brings us to a question I always like to ask when we're wrapping up one of these deep dives. What's one specific action our listeners can take today, inspired by this book, to start cultivating more happiness in their own lives?
That's a great question. I think a simple but powerful step is to choose one of the Chickabaw strategies and commit to practicing it for a week. Maybe it's setting aside 10 minutes each morning to focus on things you're grateful for, or having a difficult conversation you've been putting off to create more harmony in a relationship. Just choose one strategy and see how it impacts your well-being.
I love that.
Yeah.
Small steps can lead to big changes. And speaking of sharing, we'd love to hear from you, our amazing listeners. Have you read Choose to Be Happy? What resonated with you? What are you going to try? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to keep this conversation going. And if you found this deep dive insightful, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to Thought Pairing for more thought-provoking discussions. Until next time, keep those minds sharp and those hearts open. Have you read Choose to Be Happy?
Yeah.
What resonated with you?
What are you going to try?
Let us know in the comments.
We'd love to keep this conversation going.
And if you found this deep dive insightful,
Don't forget to hit that like button.
and subscribe to Thought Pairing for more thought-provoking discussions.
Yes.
Until next time, keep those minds sharp.
And those hearts open.